couple other things. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have two separate $45,000 requests from sort of dam related, but they're not on the focus of alternative locations and sizing. When we passed the ordinance last October, one of the whereas clauses said we should continue to further investigate alternative locations and sizing. In January, I think in the 9th, first meeting, I asked for a once-a-month update on progress toward an unfunded investigation on alternative sizing and locations. I think that's gone unfunded, and in February I don't recall it happening. So maybe we can make that happen in March, or we need to be upfront and let the voters know that we're either truly working on alternatives for sizing and requirement, or sizing and location, or that was just, and we're going to fund it, and we're going to visit it once a month and for updates, or that we were just we were kidding, and there won't be any funding and updates, and we'll go on our way doing other things. But we can't, I don't want to ignore it. I raised it in February or January. It's been ignored in February. It's now March. I think it's time to have a once a month update. I don't know if there's any support on council or how you want to address that. In January, it was just ignored. Okay, thanks, Bert. Do you want to discuss that, or I'm going to move on to a couple other things?
Those are consent items, not the consent calendar.
This is not it's not on the consent calendar. There's nothing on the consent. There is something on the consent calendar that is not related to this. The two $45,000 requests are not related to investigating alternative sizing and location.
We can, when the consent agenda comes up, we can pull that and have that discussion then about.
It's not even an issue to pull because it's not related. We're funding something that's totally different.
My view, the staff is here to talk about it. They'll talk about anything regarding that. So I think while the staff is here, we should have that discussion with them about how frequent we should expect updates, how frequent we can expect updates, and should there be change in scope, or if the scope that you think or the council thinks is different than what staff's been chasing up. I think that's a good discussion during that agenda.
I think what they're doing is fine, but it's a totally different track. There was one that we said we'd do in October, which is look at different locations and sizes. I raised it in January, asked for it to be a once a month update. It went ignored. In February, nothing happened, and it's now March. If we're not going to do it, we just need to be upfront and say we're kidding. We didn't really mean we're going to look at alternative sizing and locations, or we need to be actually putting money into it and
those aren't the only options. Those aren't the only two options.
To either do it or not do it.
You're already branding the situation here as being wrong or dark or misleading. It's simply not the case. Jim, you have any comment on this?
Do you want to talk about this now or during consent?
We'll do it during consent calendar.
Well, I would disagree with consent. The consent items are two matters that are part of the continuing efforts to address the outreach that the city is attempting to do, and their specific contracts.
Yep.
I think what Bert is raising is an issue that has gotten a little modified because of the ongoing litigation that has occurred since we filed our initial application to establish or continue our storage rights. I think what we have to do is look at what this and that overall step, and we are intending to provide information regarding this either through council, in executive sessions or confidential memos that are related to the litigation, but there's an overall effort ongoing that staff could address that's part of what you're talking about, but I don't know if monthly reports are appropriate in these discussions. I think we are looking at quarterly reports, and we want to make sure that it's consistent with our litigation efforts, because you have to remember that we are parties to litigation over these storage rights. So we always want to be careful about how we address it.
I believe this is the same conversation we had when you raised this issue back in the day, that monthly reports wasn't consistent with the direction Jim just suggested.
And that's fine. If we don't want to let anyone know that we're looking at alternative sites and locations publicly.
Well, but it's part of the ongoing litigation issues, and we are attempting to engage people that would support those considerations. But we're also trying to do this in step-by-step efforts that these two matters that are on the consent agenda do partially address. So I don't want the public to be come away from this discussion as believing, as you suggested, that we're trying to hide things. We're not. We're trying to do it in a very, very appropriate and measured manner, given the fact that we are in litigation. And that's all those are the steps we're trying to take.
And these are two items that were outlined to City Council on the work plan. So City Council's had that, we've discussed that in public. Why don't you discuss some of the other items on the work plan, including alternative siting?
So I'm Margaret Medellin, I'm the Utilities Portfolio Manager, and just wanted to put into context these two contracts we're bringing today. These are a part of looking at the resolution that was passed that included resizing of the dams, and part of that is looking at what is our real need. And so these do include an element of resizing as we look at the risk of both our existing supply and our projected demand. Then we'll be able to refine the amount of need that we need for storage. So, we are hoping by developing these tools, that's going to give us the ability to look at and refine the size of the storage. So that piece is included in here. And in addition to that, we've begun the process of looking at alternatives to storage, alternatives to supplies. But we are pacing this because we're cognizant we're putting a public process into place, and we don't want to get too far ahead of the public because we do want to develop the alternatives in that process, which we have just completed. And Bert, I think you came to our public meeting with the Consensus Building Institute when they were in town meeting to help us develop what this complex process is going to look like. So.
But I do want to be cognizant of the fact that we are in litigation, and some of these issues need to be carefully measured and carefully thought out. And I think this is an important step for our program of these two matters, but there are a lot of other appropriate steps that are and will require expertise, and that will keep coming. But to have monthly reports on those particular issues, the location and sizing of the dams, I want to make certain is consistent with our litigation efforts. And some of this might require confidential discussions. So I just want to caution council about going too far in the discussion of the storage rights as it's related to this litigation.
Well, the location and sizing, I think, are things that we owe the community and we said in our October resolution we would work on. So if it was up to me, I'd set whether it's monthly or quarterly an update, even if it's a 5-minute update that says here we're doing it. What we have on the consent agenda tonight are 2 items that contract out to try to address something. It'd be nice to address this location and sizing as well with a contract. So there's at least something happening. But so far, I don't think there's been any money spent, any contracts we've approved at council to focus on the sizing and locations. I'm losing my enthusiasm on this at the moment. So next, yeah,
On this?
yeah.
I think some regular update, regardless of whatever else is going on, is important. My understanding was, I thought we talked about monthly, and it was just things just don't happen that quickly, and so we were gonna get something quarterly, so if there is something, if there is value in everyone's time and do it monthly, I'm for that, but my understanding it was quarterly. I guess my other takeaway is, because we're in litigation, there's some aspects that minimally should at least be cleared between a council person and legal, or as a group in executive session to figure out what we wanna do, because we have some limitations about, Jim, what I'm hearing is that we have some limitations. We can't talk about every single option at all times at the moment, unfortunately.
And that's correct, and that's simply what I'm trying to caution council on, is that not everything is appropriate given the status of litigation to be addressed in public. We are trying and have done an unprecedented effort to be transparent in this whole process, and that started back last March, almost a year ago. Am I correct on that? It's been a while. But it's an unprecedented effort to be transparent in our efforts associated with these storage, conditional storage rights that we have. But we have to recognize that at the present time, we are engaged in litigation that will have some discussions in a court process. And that's all I'm cautioning council about is how that discussion moves forward. We are doing efforts such as these items that will have impact on those decisions and that information, and we do need to continue to get expertise on these issues. And these are two contracts that will help, as Margaret explained. I'm just trying to counsel to be cautious in how we address this and when we address this.
So do we have a planned quarterly update on as much as we can? Is that set on the calendar already?
Yes, it is in the calendar. It's set as May 15th, I believe, for a work session to basically bring you up to date of what other activities that you haven't already been aware of through meetings like today. And so, as you know, we had CBI in town a few weeks ago to help gather information from a variety of people who be participants in a community-based public process. And that information will be used to request a proposal from a facilitation group. So part of the next update will include a recommendation from staff as to a facilitation group to really move forward the community-based input process. And it's really a part of the work plan. These contracts are one of the tools that will be useful for a community-based process and help facilitate that process and move it forward, but we really want to have the community involved. We're just trying to get the pieces of the work plan in place so that it can be successful, it can move at a good pace. And so you will have other discussions as we have contracts or other elements that we're working on. But and to your point, all the items shown in the resolution will be and are, actively addressed by staff.
If city council wants a more frequent update, we can certainly provide that, have the attorneys vet it, pull out those things that might be part of the litigation, and he can send those to you directly under attorney-client privilege. And we can do monthly updates on the rest of it. That'd be fine. Is that okay with council?
I'd be okay with that. I just would like to know what's going on. I don't feel like we've had, I don't feel like I know what's going on. So I don't think I missed any executive sessions or anything. So.
Okay, that's fine, Bert.
Next is, sorry, the